Hola a tothom, benvinguts a the Paddock Pass podcast from the Grand Premi de Catalunya. It's Sunday. Was the pronunciation all right there, Oriol?
Perfect. Was absolutely spot on.
This is our race reaction show from round 6 of the 2024 MotoGP season. We're recording this in a little annex just outside of the media centre here at the circuit, the Barcelona Catalunya. So it might be a little bit noisy in the background as people are getting cleared away quickly. In terms of getting cleared away quickly, I don't know if you guys have been through the paddock, but wow, it's almost all gone. Everyone's halfway on the way to Mugello already.
It's genuinely impressive how quickly the paddock empties on these back-to-back evenings, how quickly they get everything out. It's really just astonishing, and also absolutely terrifying because the pace of things which are riding around, forklift trucks, lifts going up and down, all sorts. Yeah, it's very impressive.
It's nothing to do with the fact that you went into the paddock to get quotes for the podcast. They saw you come in with a hat and decided to scarper extra quick.
Possibly, possibly. But I found a victim, so who we'll hear from later on.
Those tones are, of course, Mr. David Emmett. Fantastic to have you here in Catalunya. We also have Mr. Neil Morrison, who's going to give us a quick rundown on the standings in a moment. All good, Neil?
Yes, not too bad, not too bad. Good weekend, busy weekend, but yeah, good one.
And I'm really pleased to say that our trio has expanded to a foursome this week. Oriol Puigdemont, after joining us earlier in the season, your podcast was so popular that we had to get you back on the show. So thank you for joining us and speaking your excellent English with us for the next half an hour or 45 minutes or so. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
A quick reminder before we get started, big thanks to KTM and to Renthal.com. Check out their website for all the street accessories you need for your road bike, and of course to Fly Racing. As we mentioned at the top of the show, this is our race reaction to what happened here today in Catalunya. During the week, we'll talk about a few more juicier, bigger subjects perhaps that came out of the Grand Prix, as well as tackling some of the questions that you send us through Patreon or through social media. Neil, just give us a quick rundown of the results. Just give us a recap of what happened today.
Well, I mean, we've got quite a lot to cover, I would say, Ad. But yeah, quite a dramatic race. It looked as though it was going to be a two-way fight between Jorge Martin and Pedro Acosta. Acosta crashed out down at turn 10. Then it ended up being a bit of a fight with Pecco, who came through on Martin to take victory. Yeah, so Bagnaia won, Martin second. Then it was Marquez, Aleix, Fabio Di Gianantonio, and Raul Fernandez.
We came into this Grand Prix, Dave, saying it wasn't really a Ducati track. It wasn't a Ducati stronghold. And lo and behold, we have the same three riders on the podium as well. We have three, Desmond Sedicis in the top three. So there we go.
Well, yeah, best bike on the grid right now. I think also the difference to the sprint, because obviously Aleix won yesterday, Aleix Espargaro on the Aprilia. And of course, the fact that the Yamahas aren't very good at the moment, Hondas aren't very good at the moment, so that takes them out of the equation. But I do think that the change from the soft tyre to the medium tyre had a really big effect.
Audi, aside from being one of the best journalists in the press room, this is also your home GP. So we want you to give us your grade out of 10 for this particular event. What do you reckon?
I would say 6. I don't really like this race. I like the race. I like the Grand Prix, but it's a bit uncomfortable for me because I'm farther than where I'm normally are at the other Grand Prix. So I'm staying at home. Without staying at home, I need to live with the kids still sleeping, and when I come back, they are sleeping. So yeah, it's a bit mixed emotions.
Yeah, I understand. You're splitting duties. Because if you're away at a Grand Prix, then you're fully into the Grand Prix. You're inside the MotoGP bubble. But when you're at your home GP, whether it's in the UK or in Assen or, for anybody listening to this who, comes to a race and it's in their native country, then you have that mix, don't you? Especially if you're lucky enough to sleep at home, which is one of the advantages of this circuit being so close to Barcelona for a few of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the difference. The difference is when we go to work, we travel. We go away for work. We can't work at home. It's not like you come home every evening after a day at the office. You get on a plane or you get in your car, get on your bike, whatever. You go away for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days, or in some cases 3 or 4 weeks, and then you come back again. And so to be sort of like caught between two worlds is sort of very strange. I'm fortunate. I live far too far away from Assen to actually commute. It's sort of an hour and 45 minutes, which is sort of both ways would be absolutely murderous.
Don't get me wrong. I love to commute from home. Here from home, because it's just a 20. I think this morning was a 24 minutes ride.
Yeah.
Over the mountain here, which is lovely. It's just that it's a lot of stuff to do here, and then when you go home, you still have a lot of stuff to do there at home. So, yeah, I prefer, if I'm away, I'm away.
Neil, what was your particular grade for this race?
I was probably, I definitely can empathise with what Uri has said. You're not quite totally in the GP because you're sort of going back home and doing a bit of stuff about the house at the end of the day. And I think overall we had a great sprint yesterday, super interesting and dramatic. Today's race maybe wasn't quite as high in quality. It was definitely interesting, but it wasn't like a barnstorm of a race like we've seen in the last 3 GPs. So, it wasn't a massive attendance today either. Went out, watched around the track during warm-up earlier today. There was barely anyone there in the morning time. So I think it was, 70,000 or somewhere around
76,000
today. So
Or 81,000, depending which number you want to believe.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I'll give it probably a 7, let's say.
Dave, I think the grade for the last GP was a 9 or a 10. Are you
no,
outrageously
it was more than that. It was 11 or 12. I can't remember.
Oh, that's right. You went full spinal tap.
Yeah, I went full spinal tap. Yeah, no, this one I think I'm going to go for. I'm going to go with Neil. It is about a 7. A sprint yesterday was fantastic. The atmosphere is fantastic, and it is a fantastic track, except for the asphalt, which is a bit useless, sort of thing. So, I think it's going to be. It can only really be a 7. I do love coming in Barcelona. I do love being in Spain. Do love staying in Mataró on the other side of the mountains, seeing the sea, eating the sea, and I'm staying with our friend and colleague Peter McLaren this weekend. So things are not so bad.
A good egg, has to be said.
Yes,
Peter McLaren.
Eating the sea, did you just say?
No, eating near the sea, I think.
Sorry.
But I mean, I haven't been swimming yet.
I would give it an 8, purely because the weather was good. And with the sprint, as Neil was pointing out, it feels like we're really getting double buck. You're getting decent value for money in your entertainment. It's speaking from a personal point of view, like Uri was. My younger son decided to come today with his friends, but was trying to decide whether to come on Saturday as well, because Saturday is also chock full of potential entertainment, which we know through the sprint and the morning qualification. But in the end, he came along today, and it was quite invigorating to see how MotoGP can move young people who haven't really been here before and really sat in the crowd and enjoyed it. So I think that kind of energy is affecting my vote because, again, as Neil mentioned, it was not a vintage race that we've seen in MotoGP of late.
I do think it does feel like we're starting to attract young people. Which is good, which is what we need to do. That it feels like there is a younger crowd, and I think that's really important.
Dave, keep talking. Tell us, what was your moment of the Grand Prix?
My moment of the Grand Prix was Pecco Bagnaia on the last lap of the sprint race yesterday. He had a win. He should have won. He had the bar under control. He'd ridden a brilliant race. And he just sort of went into, turn 5, a little bit more carefully than he would normally, but with the soft rear tyre. The soft rear tyre's got a bit more grip and it pushes the front. So you've got to load the front to keep the front stuck. And there was a little bit less load on the front, so the front just washed out and away he went. Up until then, he was doing very well and would have gained a bunch of points on Jorge Martin, and he didn't. He ended up again losing points to, even though he won the main race and rode fantastically, he ended up losing points. This is a pattern. I mean, we talked about it last night on the Night Show. It's a pattern. He keeps making mistakes and he's got to stop.
Well, he was probably the most vocal critic towards the slipperiness and the general greasy nature of the Barcelona asphalt, as he's been for the last couple of years. I mean, he hadn't had a podium result in his entire career, whether it was in Moto2 or Moto3. But yeah, I mean, that was obviously a critical moment because he reversed that trend today. Uri, what was your moment?
Following up on David's moment, I would say that the fuck-up gesture that Pecco made straight after the race, straight after winning that race in that specific turn 5, just because I think it shows the personality of this guy. I mean, he's always been able to overcome and to come back from difficult moments, and he normally does it in a very I don't know how to say, but solid way. And he did that again this time, overtaking, if I'm not wrong, overtaking Martin in that specific corner, turn 5, which, I mean, is a brave move given what happened yesterday. And yeah, I think it shows the personality of the champion.
Yeah, Bagnaia was smiling in the press conference when he said he was praying that the front would stick through turn 5 today. There was a different tyre choice and a different pace and significance to the race, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, of course, turn 5, was critical. Well, it turned out to be turn 10 today for the main race. But Neil, your moment?
Yeah, I can definitely see Uri's moment as one of the moments. I think it's good to see Pecco do things like that because at times he maybe doesn't show his full character and he's very reserved. So it was kind of cool to see him show that kind of emotion. It's quite funny as well. But I would go with probably Alesia's sprint victory yesterday just because it was quite fitting that it came this weekend at this track. His home circuit obviously grew up next door to Montmello and Granollers, which is just down the road, 10 minutes away. Obviously announced his retirement on Thursday as well at the end of the season. So for him to get that pole position and then really attack the sprint in a very methodical, calm, precise way was just great, I thought. Yeah, didn't quite manage to replicate that yesterday, but I thought his sprint performance was great yesterday.
Two quick ones for me, one personal, one obviously from the race. I thought Pedro Acosta's crash at turn 10 was a big shame. I think that was developing into a really tasty battle and duel. I mean, we were willing him to get in Martin's face and shake things up because we've seen, the Spaniard, the Ducati mounted Spaniard dominate races. So it was interesting to see Acosta learning again from some of his misjudgment on Saturday to be so strong on Sunday. And just a quick personal one, I brought my eldest son to the track on Friday. He was in the press room helping us out a little bit with some debriefs. And just to see his face when we went trackside and he just could appreciate the full power and the noise and everything of MotoGP. I don't think he's been in the paddock certainly since pre-pandemic. And there was an energy about a young person seeing the sport up close for the first time that I thought, marketeers and people like that really need to sort of get that sort of contact. And again, like you were saying, David, there's a lot of children around the circuit and in the paddock, and that's encouraging to see.
There was a tiny little bit of chat on Discord last night about with our patron supporters, some of the younger ones, because we have sort of younger supporters, female supporters, and they were saying, talking about which is the best race to visit and that sort of thing, and saying that they're seeing amongst their younger friends a growth in the sport as well, which is really important.
A couple of topics just to get into then for this podcast. Already you mentioned, Pecco Bagnaia. That's his second podium finish, his second win of the season. And that puts him up to second in the World Championship.
Yes,
just ahead.
39, I think. 39 points behind Martin.
And 2 points ahead of Marquez. Yep. This event was important for him personally, as you said, because he reversed his trend of luck in Barcelona. But then also it put him a little bit back into the championship picture, right, after some woeful appearances or some bad luck of late.
Yeah, but I really believe that Pecco needs to find consistency right now because, he comes from crashing to win, to crash again, win again. He needs to find some consistency because I don't see Well, we can have that from Martin as well, but I see Jorge in a really focus. I see himself super focused, and I think Mark is coming, and he's coming super fast. So he really needs to find this spot and keep himself there. Otherwise, he will probably miss these points at the end of the championship.
I think this is probably the most Pecco Bagnaia weekend of any Grand Prix that we've had in the last 4 or 5 years, isn't it? Because it had everything of, the best of Pecco and the kind of worst of Pecco. He was doing everything flawlessly in the sprint, timed his attack to perfection, and then this kind of moment at turn 5 where he says that he was almost trying to go a bit too slowly, which in itself seemed to be a bit of a mistake, lost the front on the last lap, something that you'd think for a double world champion in MotoGP is unforgivable. And then how do you recover from that? Because it's such a head in the hands moment. Everyone is saying, what are you doing? And then he comes back on Sunday and produces a performance of, again, real quality, real sort of controlled aggression, timed his attack late on to perfection, managed his tyres brilliantly. No one could live with this pace late on. And that's just the kind of dichotomy that you have with Pecco. It's 95% brilliance, but there's always just that little threat of a mistake or something happening which could almost self-sabotage his efforts.
Is that also the same for Martin, though? I mean, is that, Martin, can win from the front, and I thought his recovery as well from, a pretty damp showing in the sprint.
Yeah, but this is Pecco's problem, is that Jorge Martin has been superb. He hasn't made, he's made 1 or 2 small mistakes. He hasn't done what Pecco keeps doing, which is make big mistakes. I
don't know, Dave. There's a bit of Jerez racetrack with some Pramac Ducati still that needs to be scraped off it.
Yeah, but that's just one. How many DNFs has? 4 DNFs is quite a lot in 12 races. That's a 33%. That's not fantastic statistically. So yeah, I mean, Pecco's sort of the good point of Pecco's crashing is that he tends to crash in the sprint race when there's fewer points at stake, but you can't do it. Especially what Jorge Martin has made a big step this year. He's been really consistent. He is still making mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but he's much more consistent. And if all he has to do is keep this up. And he will, and the championship is going to be within reach. There's still a very long way to go, and there's a couple of riders coming, but he's much more consistent.
It seemed like he was riding a little angry today. Well, that's at least what he said, or that's the impression that he gave after the race, because he said he was thinking about, I think it was in one of his TV interviews, he said he was still thinking about that last lap crash in the sprint. And that obviously must have been really disturbing him, but for him to have ridden in such a controlled manner today in the feature race, I think was kind of testament to him, and showed kind of once again that when it comes to managing a race, he's maybe not the absolute outright fastest guy on the grid. You think Martin and Marquez might have a little extra step in that regard, but just in terms of having to manage a really difficult situation on a tricky track which has low grip, everyone's struggling with tyre management, especially with the big tyre drop towards the end. In that kind of circumstance, you generally bet on Pecco because he just has this kind of way of bringing his on-the-bike intelligence to the fore. Yeah,
I mean, that's it. He's incredibly intelligent, but he does make mistakes. And if you look at his past 2 championships, he's made a lot of mistakes and won the championship comfortably despite making the mistakes. But that's because he was up against rivals who were making more mistakes. When he beat Quartararo, that was because Quartararo's second half of the championship fell apart. When he beat Martin, was because Martin took a long time to get going. Jorge Martin today said, this is the best start to a championship that I've ever had, even in Moto3, even in Moto2, in everything. So I think this was going to be even tough. And as Uri said, Marquez is coming. Marquez really is coming. Mark keeps on talking about the plan. We're following the plan, and he keeps on getting closer and closer to the plan. And the plan is quite obviously start winning races and win the championship. He's not going to say that he's going to win the championship, or he won't say it until he's won a few races. But it's quite clear that that's what he's after. And you have to say, he's only 1 point behind, 1 or 2 points behind. Yeah, that's it. If you're 2 points behind Pecco Bagnaia, then you're in the championship.
I just want to say that now we have a new, in my opinion, we have a new Jorge Martin. He's made a click in compared with last year. So it's a new kind of rider, at least what I see from him, is that he's more relaxed. It looks like he has nothing to lose. So he's going to go full on. Today he made a fantastic race, maximizing all the situation without risking a crash. And also, as David says, Mark is coming. And Mark has been there, has found himself in a difficult situations, and I don't see this guy giving up. And after the race, he said he was pretty clear today. If I'm able to fix my single lap problems, I can target the title.
I don't think I've seen Mark this happy since 2013, 2014. All that fooling around, dancing in front of the crowd and all the rest of it. He said more as happy as 2019. I think it's before that. He has the youthful joy back again.
I would say that it's all, in my opinion, I think it's all part of that offensive move from him in order to get the second Ducati factory seat next year. I think he wants to show himself as the full package.
Yeah.
On track and off track, and on TV and all the stuff. All these shows that he does after the races, I think he just wants to show that he is the full package, and that he hopes that Ducati will take that into consideration.
Uri, we've asked you this before, I think, but about Jorge Martin. Why are we not predicting he will win more often, or why are the fans not reacting to him as they are? Is it simply because Mark has a better story at the moment, or Pedro Acosta is shining a bit brighter?
I think it's just a matter of two things. I'm not going to say that Jorge Martin has no, how do you call it, charisma?
Yeah.
He's not a charismatic racer, but it's just that you only found riders like Mark or Pedro.
Or Aleix.
But especially Mark or Pedro, they is just one in a...
Oh, you mean a once-in-a-generation talent rather than a personality?
Martin, don't get me wrong, if Ducati in the end chooses Mark, I think it would be totally unfair.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I would probably understand that.
Yeah.
But I cannot imagine Ducati choosing Marquez at the moment. But I would understand that.
I think he's going to be lucky in that the choice will be basically done at Mugello, where, at the moment, there's no contest. Jorge Martin deserves to be on that Ducati. Marc Marquez, you would choose because of just the marketing, the promotion. Jorge Martin, because of his results. I think the biggest decision is you put Jorge Martin on the factory bike because you don't want to have to beat him on a different bike. And Marc Marquez, if he wants to leave, he's going to be 32 next year. If he wants to leave, he has to spend another year learning a bike. And this is clearly the best bike to have. So you can persuade him, look, Mark, here's the Pramac or whatever, here's a GP25, here's full factory support, you'll get a fair chance to try to win a championship, which is what he wants. What he wants is to win races and win championships.
Neil, when it comes to Marc Marquez, I think our friend and colleague Matt Burt said in the press conference he's made up something like 45 positions in the last two Grand Prix because of his qualification. And like Uri said, it's coming, isn't it? I mean, Marc Marquez is like this black cloud that's sort of slowly coming towards MotoGP. And when it starts to rain, we're all going to get drenched in Marc Marquez results for the rest of the season. But how did you sort of see his performance this weekend? Because it was worthy of merit, up there with the race winner.
Yeah, it was. It was another fantastic weekend. I think of all the tracks, one thing is qualifying 13th at Le Mans. I think here is even more risky qualifying back in 14th just because of the history we've had at the first chicane. Yes, we've had shunts at the first chicane at Le Mans as well, but here even more so, especially in the last 2 years. So, his performance yesterday in the sprint to come from 14th to 2nd. He lost the wing coming round the first chicane after contact with Jack Miller. to come through from second from that position was quite remarkable. And he acknowledged today that he didn't have the pace of Martin or Bagnaia, but he still managed to pretty much maximise the kind of conditions of the race. He said repeatedly in the press conference today that Mugello, the aim is to sort the qualifying out, because that is really holding him back. You could have won both races at Le Mans had it not been for the qualifying. You could have maybe done something similar here, or maybe not won the race, but he could have been up there anyway. And I think he's still paying the price for his inexperience with the Ducati, because Fridays have been a bit of a disaster for him in the last 2 race weekends. And it's just trying to understand the circuit, trying to get up to speed on a new package in such a rapid kind of succession of sessions on a Friday is kind of costing him, and he's still paying a little bit for that inexperience. So he said repeatedly that trying to fix that qualifying is what's kind of separating him from third or second to victory.
Udi, I want to ask you about Aleix Espargaro, because this was very much his weekend. I mean, the sprint victory yesterday was emotional, it was memorable. My question to you is, what do you think of this guy as a personality, as a character in MotoGP, and will he be missed when he's not here next year? And Dave, maybe some of our listeners or people who watch the race will be wondering, why wasn't Aleix as fast today as he was yesterday? So what was your view on that? You first, Udi.
I think that we're gonna really miss Aleix, because I mean his story is completely different than most of them, most of the others. I mean it's super interesting finding a rider who describes himself as a hard worker, other than he repeats, maybe I don't have the talent of the other guys, and by repeating that to himself, I think he has built a really strong personality, and I think he's one of the, let's say, in my opinion, most eloquent guys on the grid. His points are really clever, and it gives you a really good perspectives about whatever question you ask to him, and not only that, Aprilia will lose, because I don't see Aleix being a test rider for Aprilia in the future. I think Aprilia will lose some drive losing him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a journalist's dream, isn't he? Because you ask him a question, you get a very forthright answer, and you usually get quite a unique point of view as well. Sometimes he says things which other riders don't say. They can be quite controversial, and maybe
that's what I was trying to say in my English from Masnou.
But yeah, and sometimes he can maybe come across as slightly hypocritical, and sometimes you think, okay, that doesn't really make sense. But generally, he gives you something which makes you think, okay, that's a point of view that maybe I hadn't thought of. So yeah, I think it's going to be a big miss.
The only one who comes close really is maybe Luca Marini for explaining this sport or riding a motorcycle to us. But Aleix always does it with that extra dramatic edge, like you said. So we spoke a lot about Aleix Espargaro in our Thursday show. So guys, if you want to check that out, just go ahead towards the first Paddock Notes episode from the Grand Premi de Catalunya, and you'll be able to hear it. But Dave, Aleix didn't win today. No. He didn't even get on the podium. Nope. I think at least 2 of us tipped Maverick Vinales to win this weekend. I think he finished 12th.
I would just like to say that I didn't tip him to win this weekend.
You've got cake around your mouth, Dave. Just be careful.
The change in tyre, really the difference was the change in tyres. Aleix was really, really good on the soft. He didn't feel at all comfortable with the medium. The problem with the medium, because both the soft and the medium could last the distance, the problem was overheating. You had to be careful not to overheat overheat the soft rear tyre. Aleix basically said, we looked at it, we thought about it, but we couldn't risk it. We decided to stick with the medium. And you see, you could also see that what is interesting. Barcelona races are never usually not very exciting. but they are interesting because there's a lot of things happening. If you look at sort of the changes in lap times, for example, the Moto2 race was absolutely fascinating because Alonso Lopez went from doing, I think, a 42.2 to a 40 or a 43.2 to a 48.2.
Oh, look out. He's changed from Moto3 to Moto2
yeah,
now.
Moto3 was rubbish this weekend. But yeah, so you can really see that it's and also like in MotoGP as well. If you look at the difference between the fastest lap time and the lap times they're doing at the end, there's a difference in second half, and how riders were managing it. I mean, at some point, Aleix started making up half a second a lap on people, and then he just hit a wall. He just stopped. Just didn't have the feeling and the comfort with the bike. That was where Pecco really excelled in being able to do he was doing, I think, 39s almost to the end of the race, such that even Jorge Martin couldn't sort of stick with him. So yeah, it was just he didn't feel it with the tyre. The medium needed a bit of a different approach to the bike because it changed the balance. The soft the soft was pushing the front. The medium wasn't pushing the front in the same way. It was more of a neutral. The bike was more neutral, and you had to ride differently. And especially with such low grip, it made it really, really tricky.
Well, I mean, on Friday we had one Ducati in the top 5. Everybody was predicting an Aprilia and a KTM Grand Prix. It didn't turn out that way. And like KTM, Aprilia had a range of stories. Ori, for you, how do you view the Raul Fernandez story? Because, it could have been glorious in the sprint, and it was a decent result today. Is that too little, too late to maybe save his career in MotoGP? What's your thoughts?
I don't think so. I think, but again, as Pecco in a different dimension, he needs to find stability because, I mean, after the year he did in Moto2, most of the paddock, we were expecting him to be super fast. Okay, this first year in KTM was a bit of a shock for him, I think, and for all of us. But, I mean, this Aprilia works well. We've seen that. And, I think it was yesterday he was absolutely devastated after his mistake. And I think that today he did what he needed to do. He just built a solid 6th place, and from then on to start growing. Otherwise, he will be, because in the next, let's say, 3 to 4 GPs, most of the grid will be decided for next year.
Guys, Enea Bastianini. I mean, we started the weekend talking about who's going to be teammate to Pecco Bagnaia in 2025. Dave, your thoughts? I mean, is that like a little bit of a step in one direction? Is Enea out of the race after a blatant act of rebellion, which I'm sure you quite enjoyed, actually?
I wasn't actually at his debrief, but I was. Pete McLaren was telling me about it afterwards, and it did sound like an awful lot of fun, where he was basically just refusing to do the long lap penalty because he didn't think it was fair. Because he, basically he was given the long lap penalty because he cut across turn 2, but he was pushed wide by Alex Marquez, and he didn't think it was fair. He didn't think he deserved it, so he just refused to do it. And then he was given a double long lap penalty. Didn't think that was fair either. Refused to do that, and then he was given a ride through penalty. And by that time it was too late, so he ended up getting a 32-second penalty and finishing in 18th, I think. I mean, but it is fair to say, I mean, like Bastianini was not anywhere in the places where he should have been. He should have been. If you're wanting to be a member, if you want to be the second factory Ducati rider, you've got to be, the second Ducati. And he had a whole bunch of Ducatis in front of him even before the penalty.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he was not really ever going to be on the podium this weekend.
We thought he might, though, Neil, because of his way to nurse the tyre here.
But there was no real point that he showed. There was no session or, I don't know, moment in the sprint where you thought, Bastianini tomorrow is going to be the guy. I think the ride-through, he refused to do that as well. I was at his debrief. And the thing that stuck, I think, in his throat and also in the throats of Ducati was the fact that apparently, at the end of the FIM stewards meeting, When they had explained their case, he went up there with Davide Torozzi. He explained his case and said, look, it wasn't like I made a mistake and cut the track at turn 2. I was pushed off. He explained that to the FIM stewards, and they said, you know what, you're actually right. You've got a point. But the race is already done, so we can't rescind your penalty, which I think was causing a little bit of exasperation down in the Ducati box, because he was handed a 32-second penalty after the race, which would have been the equivalent of the ride through. Quite easy to reverse that.
I'm not sure. There are some penalties which, I need to go back and read the book. But there are some penalties, once they're handed out, they can't be rescinded, like a ride-through. You can't rescind a ride-through because basically it's one of those things you can't take back again. You tell someone to do a ride-through, they do a ride-through. You can't say, oh, sorry, we shouldn't have given you a ride-through because you would have ended up in a completely different position. It changes the race completely. So I suspect that's why that is.
I just loved it because it was a Max Biaggi tribute act. Biaggi refused to do the ride through here in '98, and they did it today. So fantastic stuff.
I just want to add that I think this example, this episode, just shows that something needs to be done with the stewards panel, because this is simply not acceptable. They can be right or they can be wrong in some rider's opinion, but what is unacceptable is a rider considers and thinks that he can not follow the rules and cannot follow the dictate of the referee. So if they give you a penalty, you cannot say, no, I don't agree, so I follow my own way. I think it shows that something needs to be done with the stewards panel.
That is a very good point. I think there is a lack of respect towards the stewards. There's a lack of respect because they haven't been, respect is something you earn, and they just haven't done enough to earn it from the riders.
Yeah, and this wasn't the only incident today. I was speaking to Senna Aegis, who finished 5th in Moto 2. I went down thinking Senna was going to be delighted. Best result in the class. He was raging because he was given a long lap penalty for exceeding track limits. The 5th time that he exceeded track limits, he was actually pushed off track by Celestino Vietti. And it was like, hey, you can't penalise me. It's not like I made a mistake which led to me exceeding track limits on that 5th occasion. I was pushed off track by another rider. How can you give me a long lap penalty for that? So, you can see that instances like this are kind of things that fuel riders' frustration.
Don't forget what happened with between Aleix and Zarco in, I don't know if it was Portimao, when Jerez, exactly right, where Zarco needed to be pushed out of the stewards' room by Aleix, and they supposed to be angry to each other, but in the end they agree that they are so. Yeah, I think we have reached, I would say, I wouldn't say dangerous point, but a critical point. Something, in my opinion, needs to be done.
Yeah, the one good thing which the stewards are doing are getting riders to bond over who they should be punching.
Well, I wouldn't play with Zarco. Yeah, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't be playing games with him.
Maybe
No.
just a piano.
If you can scare a leash, then I think that's something that you
How
have
can
to respect.
How can you fix that though, Ori? Is it just with more transparency by the stewards communicating more, maybe not necessarily with us, but with TV, or explaining more decisions?
I don't know if it's a matter of explaining or a matter of changing roles, changing people. I don't know. But what is clear is that we've heard a lot of things, and we are carrying many problems between riders and the stewards panel. So at some point, we need to find a solution.
Just to wrap the subject of Bastianini, of course it's not based on today or this weekend, but it looks like he's a little bit out the door now, would you say, at the Factory Ducati team? Do you think that's the case, and where do you think he goes?
Well, if it's not the case, Ducati is even busier than I think they are at the moment. But yeah, I think that he will probably. I mean, don't forget that Aprilia is looking for an Italian rider. I mean, they don't even hide this thing. So I think Enea could be the perfect match for this equation.
One more thing we should talk about, guys, is Pedro Acosta, because it was another weekend of discovery and more spectacular scenes. We spoke about it on Saturday on the Note Show on Patreon. Neil, such a shame that it kind of came to a bit of a halt there at turn 10, and then just to prove that if Bastianini had followed the long lap, it may not have been that much of a penalty, because Acosta actually came back on a damaged gas RC16 and reached 13th, grabbing a couple of points for his labours.
Yeah, exactly. I think he rejoined in 21st, so to come back to 13th was quite an achievement. But yeah, it was a big shame. It was just heating up. I don't think Pedro would have had anything for Pecco Bagnaia in those closing laps. Maybe for Jorge Martin. He said for sure, there was a podium there, and it really riled him that, essentially he threw a podium in the bin, to use his words, rather eloquent words. But yeah, he was not quite sure what happened. He was indicating that there was some small issue that caused that crash. I'm not sure what it was. He said, looking at the data, analyzing what he did, he wasn't sure of the cause.
I was there with you, and I asked him in the Spanish debrief, and after repeating his words in my head, I end up concluding that it was probably chattering what he got, but because they don't wanna
bring the subject up.
Exactly, but because I asked him, it was something that came up out of the blue in that specific corner, in that specific lap. I say no, since lap 2, I was feeling that something was going on.
There is something going on with the KTM. Like, I went down and talked to Paul Trevathan just about about Pedro and everything. He is naturally extremely enthusiastic about him. He wouldn't tell me what the problem was, but the fact that Brad Binder was also had a problem. He said that at some point, I think after about lap 5, something on his front tyre, he basically overcooked it, and that was it. That was basically the whole thing. That was why he ended up crashing out yesterday during the sprint. That suggests there is some balance in the bike. There is something in the bike which is causing issues with the front end. That is making it quite difficult to manage. But yeah, I mean, Pedro Acosta is just, he's far beyond anything that we have any right to expect of him. Like I say, Paul Trevathan was extremely positive about. He was really glowing about him. He does everything right. When he comes in after something like that, he comes and he sits down and he talks and he explains. And he's a very sort of enthusiastic person, but he's very honest and straight. But he's very. He's intelligent. He learns really, really, really quickly. He's just doing everything right, and he is. This is his 6th Grand Prix. He's so far beyond where he should be at this point in time. We all had high hopes for him, but it was sort of like, maybe he'll get a podium in the first half of the year. But it's more like, okay, so when's he going to win then?
Yeah, exactly. And just to add what you're saying there, Dave, I mean, I think these are probably the most challenging track conditions that we've had all year, with the low grip, with the high temperature, with the tyre degradation. And Pedro was up there fighting for the victory when he crashed out, which in just a 6th round is remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, he was riding like a veteran. He was riding like Pecco Bagnaia. Do you know what I mean? Like he's managing that. And again, like the lines that he's able to take. We were talking about this yesterday after the sprint race. The lines that he can take, the things he can do with the bike, other riders simply can't do.
And how natural this guy is. I mean, explaining things, even when he makes a mistake, he's able to say, yeah, it was a mistake. It was from me. I'm getting experience. But at the same time, he's able to see, I don't want to be considered a rookie anymore.
Yeah.
So I need to push the target, and I know that I'm there. I'm being faster and faster. I'm most of the time the first KTM, gas, speed, mobility, blah, 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 group guy.
Yeah.
So, I think it's one of a kind.
Yeah, I think it's much fairer is probably the wrong word, but it's much better to think of him as this being his 2nd year and not his 1st year, because he is performing at the level you would expect of an incredibly talented rider in his 2nd year with a full year of experience behind him, getting ready to challenge for the championship.
6 in the championship, and surely much more to come. Let's head into our winners and losers from the Grand Prix. Neil, up to you first. Who was your winner?
I'm going to go with Mark. We've spoken about how impressive he was and how impressive his performances were this weekend. But to come away with a pair of podiums after qualifying 14th at one of 4 tracks, I think he said, where he is expecting to struggle this year. Didn't have the pace unlike the last 2 race weekends, but still managed to come away with a double podium. It's pretty impressive, and you feel that it's only going to get stronger from here.
My winner was Aleix Espargaro for reasons we talked about. I think it's a great story. And like what he said, it looks like he's not going to be testing or riding a motorcycle. Although curiously, when he spoke to us on Thursday, he said that he wanted a break away from motorcycling. So perhaps he won't even be riding much at all next year. We don't know. But you would imagine if HRC were quick and shrewd, then they would quickly sign him up to be riding and helping develop that project, because he clearly has some value when it comes to behind the scenes team building and input and everything else. Uri, who is your winner?
I will go with Mark as well. I don't have so rich explanation as Neil says, but what is crazy is that I would choose Mark, despite Jorge is the one that has getting more points this weekend, and it happened the same in Le Mans, but we all see Mark as the winner of the last 2 Grand Prix, which is, I think, pretty a good example about what we were talking, about the full package that he wants to.
And a quick shout out for a Patreon listener, actually, PM2002, who pointed out that of all the 3 riders on the podium, almost equal on points this weekend. Martin only made a 1-point gain.
Yeah, but he did make a 1-point gain, which again counts. That's in the end. That's what it comes down to.
Is it your winner, or is it Moto 3 or Moto 2 or Moto E?
And my winner is not. It's none of those things. My winner is, to the shock of many people, is going to be Raul Fernandez, because he did everything right. For a start, his lap in.
He didn't do everything right.
No, he didn't do
Crashed out of the
everything right. No, this is right. Actually, it's funny because I think we should really be treating Raul Fernandez, or like in my mind, Raul Fernandez is the rookie and Pedro Acosta is the fast guy in his second year.
Third year.
I said second year earlier. I know that Raul Fernandez is in his third year.
Say Moto 3, Dave.
Now you're just confusing me. Anyway, what I was going to say was my winner is for Raul Fernandez because he had a fantastic weekend. He had a really, really strong weekend, as we heard from Wilco earlier. Was really good, really strong in qualifying, really strong. Qualified on the front row for the first time. Led the sprint race. Got overexcited and crashed out, but crashing out from the lead is always better than crashing out from 15th, which is what we've been doing in previous rounds. And he just had a really, really solid race. Came home with a lot of points. I think he did a lot to right a lot of the wrongs which have happened previously. And before I'd written him off completely as having a ride next year. Now I sort of like think, okay, well maybe if he can do this. He also talked about it's the importance of qualifying. You have to qualify in the first couple of rows, and that's what makes the difference.
Can you just reach over to your right and check that is actually Dave sitting there? Because first he's attending Moto 3 press conferences, talking up the race in there, and now he's praising Raul Fernandez. I mean, it doesn't really sound...
Is there a Chat GPT version of David Emmett going on
here? Is it a hologram or something?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Chat GPT is famous for its hallucinations and confidently churning out incorrect information. So yeah, I could well be Chat GPT.
You fickle man, you. I mean, Raul Fernandez was the devil incarnate for MotoGP. I don't know whether you're being... I don't know to admire your opinion or to think that you're perverting the course of our podcasts.
Of course, both.
Okay. Losers.
Perverting something.
For me, very quickly, I pegged Bastianini, I think slightly more than Acosta, because Acosta really had a chance to take a great result today, but then, lost out of it, whether it was through chat or anything else. But Bastianini, I think that he's lost that factory ride. Maybe he prospers more in a satellite team, or maybe he goes on to have another factory opportunity with Aprilia. We'll see in the next couple of weeks. But I think it was a car crash, an absolute mess of a race by him. So he was my loser. Uri, who was your poor loser from today?
Same, and I think that he has probably lost the factory his Ducati factory right for next year, and he also has lost his mind in that decision of not following the rules.
But I do like it. I mean, I have to say, like,
I mean, for us,
the
it's super,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
super.
It's just very, very funny.
No, and the best thing is how natural this guy was when we asked him what happened. I mean, you didn't see. No, I don't wanna. I didn't wanna make it. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I asked him, "Did you not see your dashboard?" And he said, "Oh, I saw it perfectly well."
It was like a Christmas tree. That's what he said. My dashboard was like a Christmas tree. Yeah.
You've got to kind of love that as well, haven't you?
100%.
Dave, who was your loser?
Can I change my winner? Sorry.
Who was your loser, Dave?
My loser is Maverick Vinales, because Maverick is back to MRNG, the old random number generator.
And I boosted him on my fantasy team. My Alpine Stars Paddock Pass
could you?
podcast fantasy team entry was a disaster.
I boosted Aleix. I still haven't looked at my scores. I'll have to have a look at my scores, but I boosted Aleix. Yeah, no, I mean, like, there are weekends. The problem, I mean, this is the fundamental problem of Maverick Vinales. He is the fastest guy in the world on about 3 or 4 weekends of the year.
And Mondays.
And Mondays. Oh yeah, especially Mondays.
Every Monday.
Winter, whenever. But he's just the dude has speed coming out of his ears. However, he cannot do what Jorge Martin is doing, which is put a season together, which is just be consistent and be there every single weekend. This was a Maverick Vinales weekend. You know, like coming in lots of hope, thinking, you know, maybe I can do this. He had 2 podiums here last year, and he was nowhere this week.
I hate fantasy league, David Emmett. This year you're having a Jorge Martin season.
I have a feeling I might be at the the lead at the moment, but we should see.
Don't call me smug anymore, Neil.
No, I've absorbed all of your smugness and I'm exuding it appropriately.
Neil, who was your loser?
I'm going to have to go with Brad Binder, I think, because he crashed out of the lead in the sprint yesterday, what seemed like a kind of critical moment. I think a sprint victory for him really would have changed the atmosphere, changed the narrative within that garage, but it just added to that sort of sense that things are really not going well. And then obviously the issue with the front tyre from very early in the race, really not able to make an impression on the podium fight. And you would have to say, pretty disappointing, 18 seconds off. Another weekend when Brad was consistently outperformed by Pedro Acosta. A weekend when there's been a lot of rumours swirling about KTM's direction for the future. Pit Byro had the chance on Saturday morning when speaking to MotoGP.com to say on the record that Brad will be in the factory team next year, and he chose not to do that. It sounds like there's a bit of uncertainty in that box, and from what I hear, the morale of some of the technicians has taken a bit of a beating as a result of some of this uncertainty. So we were thinking he would be fighting for the championship at this point, and it's really not happening.
I won't dispute your verdict at all now because I think it's really valid. But apparently, when it comes to the Pit Buyer interview, apparently he misheard Jack, and his comments were not alluding directly to the question that he heard. So I don't think we have any reason to suspect that Brad Binder's going to go anywhere for the rest of his Pure Mobility Group contract, and he's going to be staying in KTM.
But he is now KTM's number 2 rider.
And not only that, I mean, Brad is not very... I mean, he doesn't do this so many crashes very often. I mean, I think that's something inside his head that probably we cannot see at the moment. I mean, there's some pressures that maybe there's some kind of situation, something going on that we cannot probably... I don't have anything, I don't have any information, but I think it's just that this kind of performance, it seems strange to me.
We can see the problem. The problem's got a number 31 on the front of it.
Yeah, but I mean, if it would be only 31, I think he would be more relaxed. Maybe there are a lot of numbers and or other numbers. I don't know.
Bigger ones.
If 89 or I don't know. I know that there are something going on. I don't know what, but I feel that there's something because Brad is not normally a guy that gets himself into this kind of critique or is not affected by this kind of pressure. But I think that I don't know. I feel something strange.
12 crashes this year. He had 15 in the whole of last year, and we're just 6 rounds in.
Indeed. That's not looking too great. But anyway, that's the end of our show today. Big thank you, as we mentioned earlier, to KTM, Renthal and Fly Racing. David, safe trip back to the Netherlands. We'll be seeing each other again in a couple of days with Mugello. You're looking at me like you want to say something else.
Yeah, big thanks to our Patreons as well, because it's really cool that they've been supporting the show.
And we're going to see each other before Mugello because we're going to be recording our discussion show for Wednesday.
Yeah, that's right. We have an interview this week?
No,
we don't, do we? You've bagged a couple of interviews this weekend, so we have
Yes,
some
I
stuff
have.
in the fridge.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I had a really long and interesting interview with Corrado Cecchinelli about the 2027 regulations, but that was, I think it was almost half an hour, so, it's a big, long interview, so maybe that'll, we can save that, but it was lots of insight on, what they expect from the rules, why they did it, and all the rest of it, so it's something to look forward to. I enjoyed it.
Thanks to our patrons, thanks to our sponsors, and also thanks to Oriol Puigdemont for
Thank
joining
you very
us.
much.
Guys, if you want to read the very latest news, rumours, the best updates you can for MotoGP, then head to motorsport.com to read his stuff, because we all do. That's
seconded.
Yeah.
I mean, Uri is the best news journalist in here. If you want to know what's happening, you have to read what Uri writes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, guys, thanks for listening. We'll be back midweek, and then, of course, we'll be on the ground again in Mugello next week.